But before you've gone in, you're thinking to yourself, like all the worst case scenarios are running through your head, and you're thinking, like, what will it be like on the other side when I get in there? That's the feeling that many people face at the prospect of starting a business.
Why do we think so many newcomers have this strong fear of failure before they go after the dreams that they have?
Hi, James. Yeah, I think it's probably the fear of the unknown, isn't it? It's that overwhelming weight of what lies ahead, the abyss, the unknown, that if you think back to when you were a child and you remember that first day, that first morning before you went to school where your parents were nervous, they've got everything ready for you, you know, you're in your new school uniform, you've got all your bags packed, all the right books, everything's there. There's that kind of nervous apprehension. And there's that pit in your stomach of like, what happens when I'm there? Like, will people like me? You know, you don't know the structure of the day, the people, what it's going to be like. You're going into this new world. And it's a bit like that when we're starting a business, right? It's just that we're doing it in adult form. So, you know, it might be a bit like if you've ever started a new job, you can possibly relate to that. You think back to that morning before you'd gone into the unknown, because as soon as you're there, it's usually fine, right? But before you've gone in, you're thinking to yourself, like all the worst case scenarios are running through your head, and you're thinking, like, what will it be like on the other side when I get in there? That's the feeling that many people face at the prospect of starting a business, right? It's something that we can certainly relate to, and we've all been through it. I like to try to reframe it in a way that's a bit more empowering as well. So if you think that it's not the fear of the unknown necessarily, but it's the thrill of the potential discovery that defines that feeling, you can kind of see it as a positive. So that adrenaline rush, rather than thinking, oh, that's coming to me because of fear, it's not. It's coming to you because of the potential excitement and the discovery of what is on the other side of it. And then that kind of allows you to embrace that feeling and use it in an empowering way rather than a paralyzed by fear kind of way. But I think if we really drill into what the roots of fear are, a lot of it comes from that societal expectation of, you know, failing isn't just this personal thing. Because if I've put myself out there into the public eye and then I fail, or, you know, even if I just tell my friends and family I'm doing it, it feels like I'm not only letting myself down if I fail, but I'm letting everyone else down, everyone who's watching me. And it's that same feeling as if you go up on stage to give a speech or something and you just forget your lines. It's that petrified feeling that you get. And a lot of people say that's their worst fear is public speaking because of the sort of what happens if I forget what I'm saying. And so I remember that gut-wrenching feeling before launching my first store and first going into business for myself. It really does. You just don't know what's on the other side of it. So I can totally relate to how that fear can hold you back. If you've ever taken an exam and you've had that apprehension of waiting for the results of the exam, perhaps, you know, your GCSEs or your A-levels, or maybe you're just waiting to find out if you got offered a job that you interviewed for and applied for, that kind of, that knot of anticipation in your stomach where it's like hope mingled with fear, and it's this strange mix of emotions, and you don't quite know how to handle it. And I know that I'm not alone with this, and if you're experiencing this as well, you're certainly not alone. Many very successful entrepreneurs have faced nervous moments along their journey, but you just have to look at what they did in those moments and the courage that they had to see it through to the other side. So think of Elon Musk, right? He came days from bankruptcy with Tesla back in 2008. He was burning through cash at such a scary rate with that company, and they couldn't find investors because the economy was in turmoil. It was a mid-2008 crash, right? And he nearly put in all of his own money just to keep Tesla afloat. And it was make or break. It literally came like days, if not hours, from bankruptcy. But ultimately, he had the courage to see it through. And look where he is now and what happened, right? So it was make or break, but it did pay off. And the same is true of many entrepreneurs. Think of somebody like J.K. Rowling and how close she came to not launching Harry Potter. When she first took the Harry Potter transcript of the book through to publishers, she got rejected by so many publishers who just didn't see the potential or the appeal. And they just advised her, you know, stick to the day job and you're not going to make much money in children's books here. And how wrong they were, right? Because she showed that courage. She overcame that fear that would have held so many people back because they'd have thought, maybe they're right, I won't proceed. And because of that self-belief and that hard work, she is now where she is, which is because of having that courage to see through that fear.
And it's so important to remember these successful people, and there's so many stories of famous people that had so many failures before they inevitably got to the success they got to. I think it's important to remember, and you can visualize somebody in your life. Think about the most successful person that you know. Maybe it's an uncle or a friend of a friend, and think about their success. They would have had all of the same fears that you had, exactly the same. We're all human. Everyone has these fears before we go in to do something new. But the difference is that they did it anyway, and they took the actions that got them to success despite of the fear. I think that's the key there. So you think about these successful people, sometimes we put them on a pedestal, we think it was all easy for them, but they will have had the same fears. These stories come out over and over again. And importantly, these successful people that we put on a pedestal, in fact, they've had more failures than us. People that haven't started yet and people that haven't really gone after their goals haven't had as many failures as the people that we look at as a big success. So you can try and reframe failure in your mind as an essential in order to get to success. And it takes away some of that fear. Certainly did for me when I decided to go after my goals and start my own dropshipping business. So we've chosen dropshipping as our fulfillment model for our business. Do you think that dropshipping could be the answer for somebody that is paralyzed by fear?
Well, it's certainly a lower risk, easier to get started with entry model into business compared to going and spending £100,000 or taking a huge amount of debt out to go and lease a warehouse and buy in loads of stock and then have huge liabilities, right? With dropshipping, very little upfront cost to get started. I'd say it's the perfect entry business model for a new entrepreneur. I mean, I was out the other day with my son, helping him to learn to ride a bike. He's only 2.5 at the moment. And you know what it's like when you first start to ride a bike, you're very wobbly, you're not stable, you're not confident, right? Like us in business, if we're first-time entrepreneurs, we're just getting started, a little bit wobbly, not really sure like kind of what we're doing. Well, I wouldn't just you put him on a mountain bike and be like, off you go. You start out with the small bike, then you have the stabilizers, then you kind of work your way up to it. And so it's very much the same in business. You know, you want to find that support to gain your balance, to get that stability, and then eventually you can start really expanding and diversifying later and doing all the mountain biking and the BMX jumps and stuff like that. But when you first start, if you're just looking to replace your income from your job, well, I mean, if you follow the right dropshipping model and implement the strategy correctly, you don't even need to overcomplicate it. I think people kind of have these plans of like global domination with e-commerce, so they overcomplicate things so much. And from the outset, you think, well, what's your first milestone? Maybe to replace your income, maybe to hit a couple of 100,000 per year in income. And once you've achieved that, then maybe you say, okay, it's working really well, but maybe I've started to hit a bit of an income ceiling at that point. Okay, now I'll look to maybe bring in some stock or start a product line myself. But in terms of overcoming the fear, I mean, the mistakes that you can make in dropshipping is a lot more forgiving because they're not catastrophic mistakes usually. You know, you might spend a little bit too much in ads, or you might take a little bit too long to get order out to a customer, but they're all learning experiences. And I think something that you can do to speed up your learning experience, like shorten that learning curve, is just get around a community of other people who are already doing what you want to do, because that guidance helps us avoid the common pitfalls, because they are common. Like, these are the same traps that people fall into time and time again. So if you're around a group of people that can say, oh, that's something to avoid, that's something to avoid, it gives us that confidence to persevere. Because at this stage, when you're first thinking of starting, you don't yet know what you don't know. So later on, you might encounter things, and you at that moment, you'll need to ask a community of people that will likely have the answer. But right now, you don't even know the questions, right? Because you can't know them until you encounter them sometimes. It's a bit like if you're bowling and you're a beginner with bowling and you have the bumpers up at the side of the bowling alley. It's to kind of ensure that the ball doesn't end up in the gutter, right? Every time we think that in business we might be veering off course, or we have an issue that suddenly arises in our business and we think, no, this could mean that I end up bowling the ball into the gutter. We just ask the community of others, and they're like our bumpers, right? They keep the ball on track because they're already doing it. So why reinvent the wheel? Just ask a community of people who are already in that place. And I think that's one of the best ways you can really overcome fear. It's just asking others who are already on the other side of it.
Yeah, it's so empowering to know that somebody else felt the same fear or is feeling the same fear at the same time. But after a conversation and connecting with other people in the same position, you can realize how you can overcome that fear together. And other people have done, maybe only a month ago or a year ago, and they can tell you exactly how they got through that particular fear. And it just empowers you so much to have that around you if you can get around a community of like-minded people. I also think it brings the fear into the light. Often the fears that we have are just in our minds and they don't ever come out. We don't ever express them. They just feel like like your stomach feels tight. It's a real feeling in your chest and you have your mind full of thoughts. But if you don't express those or understand what the fears really are, it's easy to enlarge them in your mind and allow them to take over. Something I read in one of Tim Ferriss's books was about the idea of fear setting, and he explained it perfectly. And I read it just at the right time as I was about to start my own e-commerce business. And he tells you to write down all of the fears that you have, put them on paper, bring them into the light, look at them, shine a light on them and see, are they really as scary as you think they are? And that made such a difference. You write down all of those fears. And for me, it was fears of failing and not being enough, being a waste of time, waste of money. And then you think about what the worst case scenario would be if all went wrong. And you realize that that worst case scenario isn't going to kill you. You can stand up to it. And in spite of that, you can still push on. And then realize that the worst case isn't too bad. So we should stop worrying about the worst case and instead allow time in your mind to start thinking about success and paint a vivid picture of how success looks instead. And that's a lot more exciting to go after instead of running away from a fear of failure.